Well, we are on the cusp of 5:30, so I'm gonna go ahead and call this meeting to order. I think a two-second variance is probably okay. She agrees. It's perfect. All right, so this meeting of the Planning Commission is called to order. I assume you have attendance covered. All right, thank you, Jen. Minutes. I would look for a motion to approve the minutes from July 25th.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from the August meeting.
Yeah, it's a good call. I don't know. I lost track of time.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion, corrections, updates, anything to be made? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the minutes signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. All right. We have two public hearings tonight. The way this will go, we'll do the public hearing, and the Planning Commission will vote and make a recommendation. That will then go to the Community Development Committee. What is the date of that meeting? I should have looked first. What's that? October 7th at 5 PM in the little community room in the back. And then the CDC will make a recommendation to the City Council, and that'll be brought to a vote on October 8th, then at 5 PM right here in the council. So with that said, I will suspend this meeting and call to order a public hearing to give consideration to a variance to exceed the total allowable square footage of signs at 402 West Lake Drive, Zorbas. Larry.
So Hanson Properties of Detroit Lakes has requested a variance to allow 293.5 square feet of signage instead of 184 square feet of signage that's allowed at 402 West Lake Drive. So the additional signage that they're talking about would be on the north side of the building, so the one tower would have a lighted Zorbas sign like this. And then they're talking about some signage on the gable end of the building that looks like this. Of course, once we grant them a variance to exceed the signage limitation, their signage could be anything that they can put up that's allowable signage, as long as it meets the square footage that we've given them the variance for. So they have a linear front footage of 92 feet, which allows them 184 square feet of signage. They currently have 209.5 square feet of signage, which is 25.5 square feet over what is permitted. I'm not sure how that happened or how that came about, but that's not necessarily the issue here tonight. The issue here tonight is, should we grant them a variance to allow 293.5 square feet of signage? The applicant states that having public streets on three sides makes them unique, but there are a number of businesses in town with the same situation that have adequate signage for their businesses. And just as a couple of examples, Central Market is one of those businesses, and so is Ace Hardware and Fairfield Inn. Staff recommends denial of the variance as the applicant has not demonstrated that there is a practical difficulty or unique circumstances with the property that prevents them from meeting the zoning ordinance requirements. Consideration should be given to the following findings that staff has prepared. First, the variance is not in harmony with the purpose and intent of the zoning ordinance. In part, the purpose of the city's sign ordinance are as follows: to maintain and enhance the aesthetic environment, to minimize possible adverse effects of signs on nearby public and private property, to protect and promote health, safety, general welfare, aesthetics, and image of the community, to establish standards which permit businesses a reasonable and equitable opportunity to advertise their name and service. The intent of this ordinance is to limit the amount of signage to meet the various purposes listed above without creating adverse impacts by allowing too much signage. Number two, the variance is not consistent with the comprehensive plan, as the plan calls for commercial uses to be adequately screened or buffered from any adjacent residential use. Allowing excess signage does not buffer the commercial use from residential areas. Number three, the proposal does not put the property to use in a reasonable manner. The property owner has a reasonable use of property without the variance, as they are allowed 184 square feet of signage. Number 4, there are not circumstances that are unique to the property that would justify the owner to exceed the limitation. There are other properties in town with public streets on 3 sides that have adequate signage without needing a variance. And the examples were listed earlier. Number 5, the variance will not maintain the essential character of the neighborhood as it would introduce more signage than the businesses currently allowed. In the application, the applicant presented their findings or what they believe to be the reason that they should be granted a variance, and I will read those to you. Number 1, the variance is in harmony with the purpose and intent of the ordinance. The proposed signs do maintain and enhance the artistic, aesthetic environment of the area. The signs help the business with its economic development and growth. Number 2, the variance is consistent with the comprehensive plan. In the comprehensive plan, the goals of the city are to maintain and improve commercial areas which are vital to the continued growth and success of DL. Allowing business owners to reasonably expand and encourage investment in their businesses, increase property value and tax collections. Number 3, the proposal does put the property to use in a reasonable manner. The property is a well-established restaurant that is a landmark for the city of DL. The additional sign request for the business name above the door and artwork signage is very reasonable. Number 4, the circumstances are unique to the property. The ordinance stipulates that the amount of signage is based on the lineal footage of frontage of the lot, including a corner lot. This property actually has public streets on 3 of the 4 sides of the property. As a result, there are doors at the back side of the building that is a public street. Number 5, the variance will maintain the essential character of the neighborhood. The businesses on Westlake Drive are primarily in service, and in particular the food service business. The additional signage on the back side of the building along Peoples Street will certainly maintain the essence of the character of the locality. So the Planning Commission needs to determine which findings they agree with and make their recommendation accordingly.
Great, thank you, Larry. At this time, I would open it up for public comment if you'd like to address the Planning Commission.
Hi, I'm Jeff with Lighthouse.
I'm sorry, could I ask you to come up to the podium and then state your name and address for the record? Thank you very much.
Jeff Boehm from Detroit Lakes with Lighthouse Construction. We prepared the variance. We do think it's reasonable, and to Larry's point, I don't know. Some of those signs may have been up for decades, because Zorba's has been there since 1969. And I'm guessing some of those signs were probably up before variances like this were even in existence. We didn't know the square footage until we actually applied for this variance. We think it's reasonable that the business owner should be able to put his name above a door that goes into the property. And I guess the other question is, I looked in the ordinance, I don't know what the definition of a sign actually is, because like the second set that we're asking for is really more artwork versus a sign. And, you know, the city, I think, has encouraged some of that, like the Hub 41 has some nice artwork on both sides of the building. Like the VFW, the whole one side honors our veterans as a, you know, is that a sign for the VFW, or is, you know, is that a piece of artwork? So I'm not sure, like if that second set is really a sign or is it artwork? So, I mean, we're asking what we think is a reasonable request. I don't know, do you have any questions?
If we do, we'll definitely ask you to back up, so thanks. All right, are there any other comments for the Planning Commission? Any other comments? Anyone else that would like to make a comment? Anyone else? All right, hearing none, I'm gonna close the public hearing and I'll open it up for the Planning Commission to discuss. Larry, maybe you could start off by just addressing the definition of a sign for us?
Okay,
I know it's
hold
not,
on.
it's a small ask.
I'm gonna look and see if we have that defined in the zoning ordinance, and then otherwise, we would have to take just the Webster definition of a sign and.
Sure.
sometimes some of the definition are, I don't know how you define it, but I know it when I see it. So clearly the Zorba's name is a sign. When does a sign become a mural and it's not, I guess when it's not advertising the business and it's a mural, that's not necessarily a sign, but hold on. Let me pull up the zoning ordinance and, what? Minimize that.
Advertising.
We do not have a definition of sign in our ordinance. So you'd have to go with what Webster's would define as a sign, and I don't have a Webster's dictionary on my computer.
I do. If you'd like me to read the definition from the website, I
Yes,
certainly can.
please.
Okay. I might have spoke there. I might have spoken too soon. I apologize. Since most of these are, oh, sorry, I have it. A display such as a letterboard or configuration of neon tubing used to identify or advertise a place of business or a product, a posted command, warning, or direction, and then they have a signboard with a link.
You actually do have sign in your ordinance, subdivision 3. I just looked it up because I had the ordinances up. Name, identification, description, display, or illustration which is affixed to, painted, or represented directly or indirectly upon a building or other outdoor surface or piece of land, and which directs attention to an object, project, place, activity, person, institution, organization, or business. However, a sign shall not include any display of official court or government office notices, nor shall it include the flag, emblem of an insignia of a nation, political unit, school, or religious group. A sign shall not include a sign located completely within an enclosed building unless the context shall indicate which, each display surface of a sign shall be considered a sign. That's in the ordinance.
He said he found that in section 3.
Yeah, it says, it's in, section 3, I got page, 33A7 at the bottom.
3A7?
Yes. H is what I'm looking at.
Very good, thank you.
So if we look at the signs that are up there again, Larry, can you put it back?
Sure, we can get back there.
I'm pretty sure at least 2 out of 3 meet the definition of what I just heard. One is advertising products and services that are offered at Zorba's, and the other one is obviously the Zorba's name. Unsure what the party foul means. Anybody younger wanna help me
It's a
with
fowl,
that?
like a bird. It's a fowl as a bird, but like a party fowl, like, I don't know how to explain it.
How do you explain party foul?
They're making a pun. They're making fun of.
Okay,
So
And it's a loon, right?
it's a loon, so it's a bird fowl. But
and it has the Zorba's hat on it, right?
Are we making comments?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I would only
Commission,
point
feel
out
free to
that
ask questions and make comments.
based on the findings that staff presented, there doesn't appear to be a practical difficulty in this location that would warrant a variance. And if we give a variance here, we're not really varying from our ordinance, we're ignoring it.
Larry, can you remind me the other businesses that have frontage on 3 streets? Did you say
Central
Market?
Market,
Ace-
Fairfield Inn, and Ace Hardware,
And the square footage for their signage is based on their
based
frontage?
on their frontage, correct.
Mr. Chair, I haven't.
So what,
question
like
for the
Central
owner.
Market, which frontage is theirs calculated on? Highway 10 or?
No, it's not calculated on Highway 10. It's based on one of the narrower sides, so probably the McKinley Avenue side.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Liz?
Yeah, I do have a question for you, Mr. Brown. You use landmark as a definition within one of your findings that are there, and for many years and still as part of the Zorba's branding, the big Z is there. Have you considered utilizing the big Z in place of that large word Zorba's, which would get you within compliance of the ordinance? Correct, Larry?
I don't know if that would get them into compliance. They're over the amount of signage already.
Oh, I'm sorry, with the existing signage that's there.
Yes.
Oh, misunderstood that. Thank you.
But your thinking is not wrong. If they would minimize their other signage, they could possibly have some signage over on this side of the building. But they would have to change all of their signage, maybe. I don't know.
Nancy?
Yeah, I just wanted to address his point as far as the artwork. Having served on the Arts and Culture Commission, we have been definitely trying to encourage art within the city. And I don't remember exactly, but if I remember when the artwork that was approved in the different locations, I think there were limitations as far as not having any advertising, which my understanding would be, you know, the name of the business. Is that correct?
I think it's difficult to come up with a direct answer just off the cuff, because certainly there are emblems that would be considered advertising that wouldn't necessarily state the business's name. Like Liz mentioned, a Z would certainly be signage, not artwork.
The artwork though does have
No.
the small Z in the right corner
It does, it has it on the,
and on the hat of the
you know, but
loon.
if, I mean, I like the artwork, you know? I don't have to totally understand the whole thing, but I like that we've added artwork around the community. And I remember that, I mean, at the time, the Arts and Culture Commission was mostly trying to find businesses that would say yes.
Right.
And I don't remember which part of the city we had to go through to have that approved. It wasn't signage.
Right. No, I haven't been involved with the Arts Commission, so I don't know which council committee they went through to get their approvals.
Right. So if this has artwork that didn't have Zorbas on it, but added art, would that not fall into your
No, that
staff
would be
consideration of
Would be like the murals that are on.
the murals,
Hub
correct? Okay. And so what would have to change with this artwork to have it be a mural and not a sign?
You're asking a good question, but I am not necessarily the person to answer that question.
Fair enough. Other questions or discussion?
I don't have a problem with it. I think it's nice to see the pictures. I think it adds, like Nancy said, more artwork back into the community. I don't see this as like a blatant advertisement for Zorba's, even that has a little Z on the hat. I see the colors and art, and as far as the sign goes, I guess I don't have a problem with it, knowing that we have other places too. And I think it's tricky then to try to look at this one small spot to look at the sign versus like at Central Market. You have a much broader, it's a box where this is not a box, so.
Yeah, I think Larry, you pointed out too, the variance would not speak to the type of signage, just the amount of total space of the signage. And so
Correct.
this particular one, we might like this one, but maybe what if we don't like the next one? But the variance would still stand, correct?
That is correct.
And I only bring that up just as a point of consideration
Right.
when we think about what our response will be to this.
So also,
If they want to consider doing artwork, they should go to the Arts and Culture Commission and get the approval that they got for Hub 41 or those other places where they've done artwork.
okay.
Okay.
And so then, in their building update, they have added a new tower and another door. To me, it seems reasonable to have some kind of an insignia to designate that that is their business. What,
Certainly, what they need to do is rearrange the amount of square footage of signage they have and eliminate some of the signage they have in other locations so they could do that.
so since they already are over the allowed signage,
They have to work a little harder.
or would they be allowed to stay within the over signage that they have, or would they be required to go back to the strict
they would-
measurement?
Unless they have a previous variance, which I'm not aware of, no, they would need to bring it into compliance with the 184 square feet.
Okay.
That would be for any change then at that point.
Any change they make,
Well,
unless we
they-
give a variance, they would have to go back to the,
We're getting into-
Measurement
We're
in the-
getting into issues now of
Yeah,
enforcement of our ordinance, and so
yeah,
now
understood.
that I know that they are over on their ordinance, I am probably going to have to send them a letter telling them to become in compliance with the ordinance. So,
Mr. Chair, I'll entertain a motion to accept staff's recommendation to deny the variance as presented based on the following findings of facts and the fact that this is in a lake business zone that has residential areas surrounding it. Understanding that it is commercial operation. I do not see that it doesn't allow you to use the business with the intent that was set forth. So I would recommend and adopt the following findings that were presented in the staff report.
Okay, we have a motion on the table. Is there a second? Is there a second? Is there a second? All right, there's no second, so we can continue our discussion or make a different motion.
well, I'm in support of them being able to have a Zorba sign on the tower. And so I
You
I
can
don't-
be in favor of that and still
I understand.
not be in favor of a variance.
No, I'm looking at the findings. You know, I don't necessarily see that it's not in harmony with the intent, and I don't, I think their point on it, you know, it doesn't change the aesthetic environment of the area. It's got the sign, the Zorbis sign is lit up, but they have another lit up sign on the side that's not on the building. It's a freestanding one. And there are variances or ordinances already for when signs have to go off, that it's not really throwing a lot of light onto the residences. There's no residence on Peoples Street. And so I don't necessarily see that it's not in harmony. I don't agree with that from what they've demonstrated there. And that would be my main thing. I also think that it's, for them to be able to, consistent with the comprehensive plan. I know that you have in there about the screening and buffering. I mean, to me, that's big trees and shrubs, and there's no place for that in that particular corner to do that. I'm not sure that that's a reasonable request to stay consistent with the comprehensive plan. So I need to make a motion?
Well, you don't need to make a
No,
motion,
I-
but somebody needs to make a motion.
Right. I would like to see them go to the Arts and Culture Commission to discuss your artwork. I think there is a place for your artwork on any business in town that's willing to put artwork on it. Yeah, I'm not sure that I have
You know, so
I don't have the measurements of just adding the one sign to, you have the measurements for what they're requesting as far as the signage.
So you're saying that there are circumstances unique to this property that justify granting them a variance for signage?
it sounds like what you're saying is a variance, but not necessarily this variance.
Correct. Yeah.
And just to pipe in here, your role here is to decide whether or not you believe that this variance
Right.
should be approved. If you think that a different variance might be more palpable,
Correct.
it is either the applicant can withdraw or you can deny. But you cannot change this variance. This variance is this variance.
Got it.
And just to kind of add on what Larry was saying, remember when we grant variances, they are a property right. They live with the property. So if you grant X square footage, they get X square footage. And we might like what they're proposing today, but the building could burn down. I'll knock on wood so it doesn't. They could build a new building and they still get this that square footage, and they could put that square footage wherever they want. That it's not divvy it up where you want to divvy it up. It's they get the square footage. So just keep that in mind while you're thinking about this.
Okay.
I make a motion to approve the variance as written.
Okay, we have a motion to approve the variance as written. Is there a second? Is there a second?
Is that not what you did, Liz?
She had a motion
denied.
to deny it. Yep.
I'll second that.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. All right, so we have a motion and a second on the table to approve this variance. Since this is different than the staff recommendation, what findings would you use to support that motion?
I think I reverb off of what Nancy had said on some of it, that I do think it sticks within the aesthetic. I don't think it impacts the area in a negative manner with where the signage would be going to where the streets are.
Are you indicating you would use the applicant's findings?
Yeah. Yes, I am.
Okay.
Here we are.
Did we adequately cover that, Dylan?
Yes.
Thank you. So we have a motion and a second to approve the variance as written using the applicant's findings. Any further discussion on this? All right, all those in favor of the motion to approve signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign?
Aye.
All right, motion carries. We'll carry this forward to the Community Development Committee on the 7th with a recommendation to approve the variance. Thank you, gentlemen, appreciate it. All right, let me find my place again here. I switched around documents a bunch. In one of these, that one. All right. So we are back to the second public hearing. I'm going to go ahead and suspend the planning commission meeting, and I will now call to order a public hearing to give consideration to amending the zoning ordinance of the city of Detroit Lakes relative to cannabis businesses regarding cultivation and manufacturing. Larry.
Okay, the state has passed a law that has made use of recreational cannabis legal. They've also made it legal to cultivate cannabis and manufacture products from cannabis. So the city is required to allow certain types of uses that we may or may not agree with, but we are bound by law to do that. And so the first step of that is to amend our zoning ordinance with regard to cultivation and manufacturing. So the ordinance that you have before you allows cannabis cultivation outdoors by conditional use in the RA districts in the city. And it's subject to the following 6 conditions: that a minimum lot area of 200 contiguous acres is met, growth of cannabis plants be set back 50 feet from all lot lines, the sale of cannabis products is not allowed on the property, the manufacturing or processing of cannabis plants or cannabis products is not allowed, the owner must comply with regulations in Chapter 342 of Minnesota statutes, and the owner must comply with all security, fencing, lighting, and other requirements imposed by the state's Office of Cannabis Management. Some of those rules have not yet been made yet, and so we don't know what those requirements or fencing might be. And then the other part is that we're allowing the manufacturing of adult use cannabis products and hemp products and indoor cultivation in the I-1 and the I-2 district. So that's what this ordinance does. You may be wondering why we haven't addressed the retail use, and our current ordinance allows retail activities in the B1, B2, and B3 districts, and the ordinance that we're preparing to deal with cannabis regulations in the city will limit retail sales of cannabis to the B3 district. So we don't need to make any changes to our zoning ordinance with regard to that, because that is going to be handled separately.
Great.
So that's what I have for you.
Thank you, Larry. All right, would anyone like to make any comments? All right, please come up. If you wouldn't mind stating your name and address for the record.
My name is Michael Mund, and I have a business at 1112 Jackson Avenue, and I live in Pelican Rapids. I have been looking at this ordinance, and the only real thing that is kind of troubling is, so there's different types of cultivation licenses. There's kind of a larger cultivation license, and then there's the micro business license, which allows just a very small amount of cultivation. And so I foresee, and from what I've seen in the reporting, that there is no real full-scale cultivation applicants in this area. Only there's 2 micro business and 1 meso business, which is, the micro business you can have a cultivation endorsement. And for the meso business, it's just retail locations. So, I actually applied for the cultivation license, along with, in the micro business license, along with the retail. And so some of it just seems like the industrial area, it's a great place, yep. And especially for larger cultivations, but for this, the state kind of considers them craft grows. They're kind of a smaller, kind of cultivation facility. And they can range from just a few, from a couple hundred square feet, and the maximum, for a micro business would be 5,000 square feet. There's very few, to be honest, there's very few buildings in the B2 that you could have the combination of retail and cultivation in the same building, which could be optimal, especially for employees that work both places. There's honestly only one spot that I've looked at that is considered a B2 that has that kind of space, and that's right up there next to the sandbar. It's currently Northland Welding. They have a big shop, and I've tried to convince him that he might want to rent the whole thing. But based on this, I wouldn't be able to have the cultivation in the back and then the actual retail in the front. And the cultivation would have to be at a separate spot. So I guess I would say that to consider some, put maybe a square footage on, and another thing I'd like to do would be to educate people and to have live plants right there. It's a lot easier to teach people on how to, and really I've got a hydroponic store, and so I've been teaching people how to grow for the last year, and there's a lot of people around that are really interested in that side of it. And so to be able to further that by, having live plants that weren't at the cultivation facility, someplace that they could actually get a look and, oh, this is what it's supposed to be and this is how it's supposed to go, and use those for classes in the retail store would be nice too. But I guess I would say consider having these micro grows in B2 areas, and they will absolutely be, doctrined by the state, as far as security and all those pieces that need to go into a cultivation facility. So there's gonna be some big rules anyway. So to limit it to, you can be in this little square here, might not be in the best interest of the business and, all the employees and everything too. So I would say consider, maybe putting a 5,000 square foot limit on the B2 area. And so that, depending on what the state says, that it would be at least a opportunity for those micro businesses to have that where, the public can actually kind of, not necessarily interact, but at least can see it and know what they're getting, where their product is kind of coming from. And I've seen it in a lot of other states. A lot of other states will have their retail, and then they'll have a big window and they'll show their growing cultivation facility behind it, which I know when I go in, I'm like, oh, I know they do it this way. Oh, that's, I expect a better product or whatever. So I would suggest that you allow a smaller those micro craft grows in the B2 if applicable, if it follows all the other state kind of processes. Yeah, just because it's not the big grows that, you know, some people are thinking about, you know, where it's 10,000 square feet and you're, you know, got a lot of smell going on and a lot of wastewater, you know, and all this stuff that needs to be accounted for, you know, so I would say, yeah, consider doing, letting the craft grows, up to a certain square footage be in the B2 section.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah,
Appreciate your
thanks.
comments. All right, any other comments from anyone? Any further comments? All right, hearing none, I'm gonna close the public hearing, and I'll bring it back for questions, comments, and discussion by the commission.
I have a question, Larry. It seems to me a little bit cart before the horse with the, you know, whatever's imposed by the Office of Cannabis. Is it not prudent to wait and see what all of that is, to see how that fits into Detroit Lakes?
Wait and see is not an option because starting January 1st, people are going to be applying for licenses and want to be able to locate. So we have to have our ordinances in place before January 1st.
And I think I'm gonna clarify what Larry said to us. He said some of the things aren't defined, oh, sorry, I don't have a voice. Some of the things aren't defined in the statute, such as odor management. But Larry's right, the statute does say, here's a micro business and the definition of a micro business license. And here's a macro and cultivator growers and things like that. Would that be correct?
That is correct, but we do have to take action now and be ready. And we have to determine which commercial areas we think are right for retail. The determination has been made, at least for providing the city council with a draft ordinance. The city staff has looked at different regulations and has determined that manufacturing and indoor cultivation belong in an industrial district because of issues surrounding that. And odor
Mr. Chair,
being
may I
one of
ask
them.
Larry a couple of questions? John? Thank you. Larry, I have a couple of questions, and I'm just gonna give you some cited reference docs and the fact that I have land out in California where it's been legal to cultivate and grow since, and the licensing in Santa Barbara County since 1920, or since 2022. Some of the things as a cannabis cultivator, you've got an ordinance that says it here, but it doesn't say it outdoor specific, and you want it to be outdoor specific only. You're not talking about indoor cultivation, are you, in this
We are
ordinance?
talking about outdoor.
Outdoor, so can we,
We'll change that.
okay, so that was my first note on it, because we are not addressing the indoor cultivation.
Really the 200 acre plot or whatever, that wouldn't, I imagine that it wouldn't pertain to indoor growing. Or
But we
if you had a warehouse, let's say.
If you have any questions, would you mind coming up just so that we can make sure we capture all of it? Thank you, I really appreciate it.
Really, yep, so, what was I saying? It says in your regulations to have 200 acres contiguous, and I could see that for an outdoor grow. And really, when I read it, I was like, there's no place in DL that you can really have 200 acres in the city anyway, together, that I know of. So I didn't think that necessarily pertained to the indoor grows, which it seems like now, after going through it, that might be the case, is where, you know, the way it's written is that you would need a warehouse on 200 acres.
I don't think I'm reading it that way, Larry, that
The
the.
intent was that in the RA district, we were only talking about fields and outdoor growth.
Right.
We weren't going to allow indoor growth in the RA district, but only in the industrial district.
So can I ask a question of Larry, because you brought in a discussion? Is there within our zoning ordinance an area that fits the definition as it's written now on our zoning map?
I have not looked to see if there are any 200-acre plots. There possibly are. I know that in the past there have been.
Can we
Because-
ask that to be done?
Because a few years, well, some years back, we bought 390 acres of RA land that we have converted into an industrial park. So there have been 200-acre plots in the city.
May I make a request that we have a zoning map that identifies that?
Yes.
A couple more comments that I am going to make, only because I have to drive by the area that is currently being cultivated, and it does have a pretty good ordinance in Santa Barbara County that says there's fencing, there's security, there's everything. Our ordinance as it's drafted now, I really would like to see odor management as part of a critical piece, even though I do know that the Minnesota chapter has not defined what odor management means. But I'm pretty sure there's some residential communities that wouldn't want to consider the amount of odor that's coming, or even some of the things that are coming from security, fencing, and lighting in that area.
So you're talking then just about this particular section J with adding another condition relative to odor management, or?
Or adding it to J6, including odor management.
Okay.
The next one that I'm going to bring up is volatile solvents in the cultivation outdoor. I'm not an expert at it, but I know there are means that need to be done to remove the flower, the heads and things in the cultivation process. And I do believe there are some volatile solvents that are involved in some of that farming of.
That, I would say that that's probably more manufacturing.
It-
There's some, very little would probably be used, especially in outdoor, that you wouldn't use in a regular farm, and probably less and more safe usually than regular farms, especially when it's tested in commercial. But I wanted to point out to your smell comment that I'm pretty sure that the state will have a smell kind of condition to it, but to address that locally might be really beneficial also, just because the state is, there's a lot of B2 that's really close to residential, and you might want to even go a little tighter than they do, whether you do it now or make another ordinance later or whatever. But it seems like, yeah, no, you're right. And as far as, outdoor goes, I don't think there's gonna be any outdoor fields in Detroit Lakes. But, I mean, in Becker County possibly, but that's nothing you can really do here.
Should we be considering also a sensitive area restriction, Larry, in this ordinance, just to make sure we're guarded? Should we say, okay, it's so many feet from a residential, so many feet from a school, so many feet
Yeah,
from a
it
head?
does, it actually has that in there.
You could do
It's-
that.
I'm not
So,
sure it has.
Mr. Mund,
No,
can
no.
can I just ask that you
I'm
hold
sorry.
your comments? I'll
Yes.
give you another opportunity to comment at the end, but I'd really like to complete
bet.
the discussion.
I
But
will.
absolutely, I want to hear from you again, okay? Thank you, I appreciate it.
Is that possible that we look at
That is
sensitive,
possible.
sensitive area restrictions? And just so you guys know, micro business, as he referred to, does include a half acre outdoor in the licensing component. There's an indoor and an outdoor component. That's a half acre.
That's already currently
Under the Minnesota statute, there's 100 micro business licenses that are gonna be issued starting January first. And that includes 5,000 square feet indoor definition and half an acre outdoor definition.
So we don't need to address that to put that in this. It should be coming down the pipe.
I'm sorry, what was
Do we
that?
need to then make any other recommendations of defining between what is indoor, what's outdoor, and the guidelines between those, or is that coming down the pipe from what the state is going to be advising?
Well, indoor and outdoor are pretty clear definitions without being defined. We know what the difference is between indoor and outdoor.
No,
But
but
you're
I think-
saying,
I think what I heard Jenna say was the micro, not the
a
large
micro-
outdoor.
the fact that the state would license a micro business doesn't mean that we have to allow them to have both of those operations at the same location.
So
If
are
we
we,
choose to have our manufacturing and cultivation in a different place other than the B3 district, we can do that.
so at this point, we're not, the city has not addressed what they're gonna do with micro?
The city has
cultivation?
addressed what they're allowing through this zoning ordinance. They're talking about where they're going to allow cultivation and manufacturing. And through their other licensing and cannabis ordinance, they're defining that retail sales will only be allowed in the B3 district.
But I don't see where in
Subject
here-
to some limitations as far as distances from each other, distances from daycares and things like that.
The
But-
minimum lot area of 200 continuous acres would not allow for that half-acre micro business within city limits. Is that an accurate statement?
Not, they would not be allowed to do the outdoor cultivation. They
They
would
could
have
do
to.
the
they
indoor
could do the
cultivation
indoor.
in the I-1 or I-2 district with the way we've written
Correct.
this ordinance.
Correct.
Okay. Sorry, Jenna, did you have
No,
a
I
further
just want to
question?
make sure, like, if we needed to be adding something in regards to indoor micro business, or if that's already covered somewhere else, I'm not.
I
up
think
on
so
this.
let's set the retail aside. We're not addressing retail whatsoever in this today. We're talking about the outdoor cultivation and the indoor cultivation and manufacturing as two separate topics, really. If I'm
And that's the JJ and the KK. That's at the
Correct.
bottom. I
Correct.
just don't see in those, the zones, I don't, it's not, it's just refers to that Minnesota statute.
Correct, I
And
think,
in that Minnesota statute, it designates which zones those are.
no, we're designating those because these are, if you look at it, it says section 14, subdivision 2, JJ and KK.
Section 14 is the light industrial section of our ordinance.
Okay,
Yes,
Then the heavy industrial allows all of the uses in the light industrial
Mm-hmm.
district.
okay.
so it inherits it then. So the way that this is written, we allow outdoor cultivation on a large tract of land in an RA zone that's contiguous, meets all these requirements, plus anything that we might add from a condition. And then we allow indoor cultivation and manufacturing within the industrial areas based on that section 14 subdivision 2 JJ and
J and
KK.
okay.
And then it's, to your question of do we need to address it? If there are things that we think we need to address, we can recommend adding those
Okay.
as additional conditions or changes to the recommended ordinance. This is what staff is recommending at this point. Does that adequately answer your question? Mm-hmm. Good. Okay. Further discussion or questions? So what I've heard on the table so far, we've said we need to add the word outdoor to the subdivision 5, or the section 5 edition. Is that what you heard as well, Larry?
Yes.
And then we discussed, but did not decide, whether or not we need to add odor management, solvent restrictions
In the number 6.
Insensitive area.
in number 6, right?
Or an
Yep,
additional.
I got that one too, right. So do we, and this can be, we'll have to address this through a motion. But we discussed adding an odor management and then solvent restrictions I think you had said section 6. And then we had discussed adding a sensitive areas restriction. Did I capture all of that
Yes.
correctly?
Yep.
I would still like to see a zoning map applicable to this ordinance.
Do you want to see that zoning map before we take action is the question.
That would be would like to see happen, but
I think we're getting pretty tight on our timeline, right?
We are very tight on our timeline.
Right.
what's our timeline?
Well, this will go to the council at their October meeting, and then they would have second reading at their November meeting. So that means there's only one council meeting left before January 1st, so there isn't a lot of time to deal with that. What's your concern about the 200-acre limitation?
I will get to you, I promise.
Well, let's talk about waste disposal. I mean, I guess we really don't have to worry about it because our current stormwater management doesn't run through our waste facility and for repurpose or regenerative reasons, so we don't have to worry about that. But do we have to worry about those kind of things if the plot of land happens to be on our waste management system and in our stormwater area? Do we have to worry about it if we don't include, for example, residential in sensitive areas in the definition, not just schools, childcare, those kind of things? I mean, do we include residential in the sensitive area definition without knowing exactly where that plot of land could potentially be?
Well, my preference was to leave agriculture in the county where it belongs.
I didn't hear what he said.
He said his preference was to leave agriculture in the county where it belongs.
And then we wouldn't have to try and address all of these issues and concerns.
But we're here.
Yes, we are
But we do
here.
have RA zones,
Yes.
is what we're deciding on the RA zones that are still within the city.
Correct.
Okay.
Or to be in the city in the
Or
future.
to be in the city, and that was my next question, with any kind of annexation in the future.
Right, and I believe
This
when
would be an ordinance that
when we
would be-
annex, the default is RA unless we decide
Default
differently.
is RA unless we specifically choose otherwise.
Right, okay. All right, Mr. Mund, if you'd like to make a brief comment, I'll allow it now, and then,
Just a few things you guys might wanna address, like, how does a greenhouse sit as far as indoor, outdoor? Is that indoor?
Does it have walls and a roof?
Has walls potentially, or, yes, a roof,
Yes,
yes?
it's indoor.
Okay. So as far as the timeliness of this goes, they are looking to be awarding or have their lottery for these businesses before the first, and then hopefully next month is what they're hoping for. So to have this, done in a timely manner, I guess would probably be to the benefit. I just wanted to speak to that also, and, and again, I would say to, consider having, micro grows in, and to comment on your wastewater, all that has been touched on by the state, and I'm sure they'll have more regulations, where you don't necessarily need more regulations on top of that. I think they'll probably do a pretty good job. And as far as, like you say, solvents, the manufacturing is definitely gonna have things like that are, if you look at, corn oil, big corn oil producers are in the state, they have giant facilities and, so there's a couple of hemp manufacturers around that have pretty good sized facilities too, and I don't know, and I think most of those are not in a city, but you might consider looking at manufacturing, as far as, those solvents and, even noise, but to have a half-acre greenhouse in the middle of town, it might be something you might not want. So I would say, you know, maybe consider putting some rules on that, as far as, you know, availability, or, you know, I'm sure the state will have, you know, security and all that stuff, but if you look at like Bergen's or something like that, they're in a greenhouse, they, you know, a big greenhouse that is secure and all that, but you could have someone that just pops up a couple of hoop houses on a half acre, you know, and
Sure.
and, so, you know, consider something like that when you're writing this up too.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Larry, real quick, just because I thought of this, the like solvents, the use of chemicals, things like that, are those things addressed in other restrictions within the industrial ordinances already? In any way that you were
Well-
aware of?
Typically, in the heavy industrial district, you allow all kinds of dangerous activities like acid manufacturing and
Right.
things like that, so I don't think there's a restriction on the use of solvents. Those
our
are mostly
ordinance-
regulated by the EPA and
Right.
things like that, so.
Okay. That was the core of my question. Thank
Can
you.
I add something to that? So I'm gonna put on my water environmental hat, okay? And I'll say 2 words, forever chemical.
Right.
Whoops.
Well, everything's chemical.
But it becomes a forever chemical if we don't address it.
Okay, we have discussed this quite a bit. I think we're maybe at a point that we need to consider making a motion.
I just wanted to clarify it, so
Yeah.
the point that the gentleman is making as far as the indoor
Mm-hmm.
cannabis, at this point, this ordinance addresses the indoor cannabis cultivation to be only in the industrial zones,
That is correct.
not in an area that he was talking about that could be a possibility. That would have to be a different ordinance to be added later.
I'm sorry, what?
That would be a different ordinance that could be
Yes.
added later.
Correct.
Okay.
Here's another thought that I had too. It may be wise if we just, even though this may not be perfect, to adopt this version of the ordinance and we can amend it later if we get more information about where the RA districts are that would be possible candidates for this, other restrictions for stormwater drainage or for buffering from other areas or uses that we think it should be buffered from. So that would be my suggestion, that we get something down and then we can always amend it as we learn more.
Okay, so what do we want to do?
I have one more clarification, I'm sorry.
No, you're
And
just
so
fine.
the indoor cannabis cultivation in the industrial area, that, that basically applies to anybody that's growing some weed in their house or their backyard? I mean, if there is somebody putting up a little, you know,
These have to be licensed by the state of Minnesota.
These have to be licensed.
That's spelled out in the ordinance. They
correct. So
have to be-
if we have somebody that puts a little greenhouse in their backyard and starts growing marijuana, what is our management of that situation? None. I mean, I
Yeah,
just,
It's the
personal-
same as it is now.
same
That's
as it
a-
is now, okay.
And personal cultivation is managed by state law in the
Yes.
new laws, and there's not, I mean, it is what it is.
Okay.
So, I mean,
Well,
yeah.
can I make a motion?
yes. Do we want to make sure we at least include the outdoor in it?
I'm going to, yes.
Sweet.
But you're gonna have to help me fill it in. I'd like to, move to, accept the ordinance, as written, in addition to the points of outdoors for the cannabis cultivation.
So section J there?
That's section J. And also to add, help me out with this, Liz,
Sensitive
the sensitive
areas.
areas. To me, that seems to be, should be a number 7.
Number 7 is what?
Sensitive areas or receptors,
Right.
such as childcare, schools, residential.
And what's the distance away from those that do we need to put that in there?
Yes.
Yeah,
And right now, the current statute, I believe, has, for retail, the Minnesota chapter has 300 feet from, oh, I can't
Listed
remember.
up to 1,000 feet between existing retailers. Our ordinance that we're drafting has them 500 feet apart.
But between retailers, but that doesn't address the sensitive areas.
I don't know what you mean by sensitive areas.
That's
so
what we're trying to define.
Like
it.
That's
schools
this-
or Head Starts or
Schools, daycares,
daycares, those sensitive areas.
There
With an
might be a
appropriate-
State law already that's, puts out those measurements.
I didn't hear him.
He said there might be a state law already that puts out
Okay.
those measurements.
and then you also wanted to include odor management. in
Correct, and that
item
was the
six?
other point. And it seemed to me that that could be added into number 6.
Yes,
I think I covered all the additional things.
So if I got this right, we have a motion on the table to approve the ordinance as presented with the addition of outdoor to section 5 subdivision 4J. As in addition to that, adding to number 6 underneath that, odor management. Was there another one that was just odor management?
And sensitive area restrictions.
And then adding a number 7
7.
for sensitive area restrictions to include,
Schools, daycares, or childcare, Head Starts.
I just ask something on that? Would
Yes.
residential be included?
Hmm.
I mean, what if you have a child in a residential home, that doesn't count the same as a daycare? Say
Well,
you
we
have
talked
a
about it.
next
I don't know if
family's
we-
home, but you can't do it next to it.
And without a zoning map, doesn't include residential, should it include
you
residential?
could say 500 feet from homes as well.
Well, this is underneath, this is underneath you gotta have 200 acres for this area anyway. But without a map, we don't, Where there is potential close to any residential, we're not sure.
I think with those kinds of buffers, you probably made it very limited that if there would be any place that would meet all of those requirements.
And can we put those restrictions in there? Can we be more restrictive than the existing statute?
The statute is a little bit unclear about
Sensitive area.
outdoor cultivation of this, so I'm not sure. I've talked with the League of Minnesota Cities about what kinds of restrictions, and they said you can have reasonable restrictions. So I'm not sure.
which reasonable
where
is
that
also nice and
line is
vague.
From reasonable to unreasonable.
Yeah.
It's, it's,
If we
And that
include
has a-
residential?
Since this is all a new law, a lot of this stuff is not defined
know.
yet.
I don't think there's 200
What the state
acres in
might
each.
find reasonable may change over
It could
time.
be.
I mean, if,
And if you
Go ahead.
add
We do that
open it
500 feet, will we add that to number 2?
residential and it's gonna
50 foot from all lot lines?
No, we would add it as a separate, item 7,
right,
must be 500 feet from sensitive areas such as schools, childcare, Head Start, and homes.
Wouldn't that contradict number 2? 50 foot from all lot lines?
not necessarily,
No.
because that, it could be 50 feet from a lot line that is not near any of these things.
It doesn't contradict
That's just
that.
the growth of the plants has to
Just
be
the
50
plant.
feet
Correct.
from where the lot line is, yeah. So in the interest of considering residential, to me, that would be like future annexation. You know, you're annexing a wide open area. More than likely, it's gonna have some residential, you wanna have some residential if it's, you add, 500 acres.
Well,
If
I
we
guess
include residential, it's gonna be a certain limit from where the cultivation could be, from where they would build houses, which would be important, I would think.
So do you want to include the term homes in that restriction?
In the number 7.
Yes.
And we have, and the distance you established was 500 feet?
He suggested 500 feet.
Suggesting 500
You can
feet.
include whatever
I
you'd
think
like in your
500,
motion.
500 feet is fine.
Okay.
I would include homes, yeah.
Okay, so let me clarify number 7. Larry, why don't you read back number 7 the way you've heard it?
Number 7 must be 500 feet from sensitive areas including schools, childcare, Head Start, and homes.
Is that the way you'd like it to read?
Yes.
Okay. So with that, we have a motion on the table to approve it as written with the addition of outdoor, the addition of odor management to .6, and the addition of a .7, 500 feet away from, minimum 500 feet away from sensitive areas to include schools, childcare, Head Starts, and homes. Is there a second?
I would second that motion.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second on the table, and the lawyer has raised his hand, so please go.
We would.
I'm sorry, I just want to make sure that it's clear we've discussed it kind of on and off. But the city doesn't get to regulate properties that are currently in the county.
Correct.
And just so we all know that.
Yes.
And if the county makes regulations that would allow somebody to put in a cultivation area and that is annexed into the city,
Yes.
the city does,
Bets are off.
they get to keep what they're doing, just so we're all clear.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I understand that. But thank you. I appreciate that. So we have a motion and a second on the table. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. We will be reviewing this on Monday, October 7th at 5 o'clock in that little room back over there with the Community Development Committee. All of you are welcome to join us if you'd like another rousing round of discussion on this one. And then we'll bring it to the City Council on Tuesday, the 8th at 5 p.m. right here. All right, Larry, is there anything else for the commission?
That's all I have.
Commissioners, do you have anything else? All right, hearing none, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you, Sean, for putting up with me.
Oh, this is good. This is why we have, I mean, this is the purpose of this